How's everybody doing? Once again, that is a song called Houston Barbecue by Sarah the Illstrumentalist. It's good stuff. It's a great name. Welcome to the Friday evening stream and the 31st iteration of what I call Armor of Truth Radio, our almost daily show where we talk about what's going on in the world around us and try to figure out how to navigate it without getting it all over us. Block Party Vintage, The Sunny Fawn, HQ Tactical, Ezra, Mary, Tenore, Sharon Fulton. I see you folks out there. I see what you're doing out there. Lurking. I see you lurking out there. All right, let's kill it. Jared Ritter, what's up? Josh Rhodes. All right, folks. Nana P, there you are. I knew you'd be here. All right, folks, let's talk about some stuff. Anyone see anything strange or a little unusual on the screen? That thumbnail get your attention? Well, this is where we're headed tonight. No, we're not going down. We're not going down the Aleister Crowley rabbit hole necessarily, but we're going to talk about the essence of what it was that he was promoting, the spirit he was drawing from, and see where that applies today in this new normal. I am whoever you say I am. Welcome to the stream. I say you're someone who loves this channel. That's what I say. Well, what are we even talking about here, folks? Let's just dive right into this. Before we do, let me just mention anyone who feels led to do so, anyone who supports this work, this YouTube channel, this ministry/mission, you can do so by following the links in the description. We do still have currently have access to super chats. Anyone who wants to participate that way, for now, that is the best way we have to do instant donations, where you can get recognized live on the stream. We'll be changing that in the near future to a Streamlabs only setup or some other setup. But also, you can go through PayPal for a direct donation that way. They don't take very much of that. It's a good way to do it. Those links are in the description. You can also become a patron over on Patreon, and you will see scrolling down on your screen some of the new PayPal supporters that we have there for the month of June. And the PayPal supporters are mentioned there too. But once again, folks, this information, this channel, this ministry is for everyone. It can't be behind a paywall. Not this information, not the gospel. Can't put the gospel behind a paywall. That's ridiculous. Don't even try that stuff. Over on Patreon, we deal with, I use Patreon to deal more directly with the patrons individually. That is the goal over on Patreon. And there's some exclusive content available over there for the patrons to take a look at. And I do check in once a month with a little update, what's going on. So, let's talk about some stuff here, folks. This is a Friday night, and it's a Friday night where I am. What are we dealing with here? Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. goes on to say in that little slogan, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And they say, love is the law. Love under will. Under whose will? Certainly not God's will. Under man's will. And what do they mean by love? Well, who knows? Because it's subjective. It's not objective, it's subjective from person to person. So, does it really mean anything? Well, anyway, let me just point out too. Some of you who follow this channel might also have seen in the in the feed from my channel today. Well, they're taking videos down again, and you know what? They can do that. That's what they do. They're there to shape and control the narrative, and we're here to keep telling the truth. So, that's the nature of the game. That's how it works. We expect them to take stuff down. Listen, any of those videos they remove, I can easily remake. No big deal. We're going to do one right now. So, we don't let that bother us. I have had to make an executive decision to forego some of the CV-19 videos on this channel because I will not risk the platform deleting the channel because of that type of content. We've said everything we need to say about that. We've made our points. Look, people in the world realize, people all around realize we're being sold. It's nonsense, okay? And my father told me he went into the bank earlier today, and what a fiasco. Just going into the bank was. He said as he was going in, a couple people were coming out. They were asked to leave because they didn't have masks. Okay. So as he went in there to do his banking, you might imagine the man which gave rise to me, he might be a little outspoken. That's kind of runs in the family. So he just asked talked to the teller there and said, well, this is crazy. This is ridiculous. What is going on? Is this ever going to stop? Is this, because they're sitting there talking behind us, like trying to talk to each other with, with muzzles on. You can't even hardly see their eyes. It's all right. We've done it over and over here. We don't need to drop anchor there. We know. The point is, everyone around realizes. Most people anyway, not everyone. And what we've seen is this thing has become a political symbol. Do you believe the dogma of the pandemic? Do you trust it? So anyway, what we've seen happen in here, to this little channel, this small channel over here in our corner of the internet, they've found us. They've identified us. They know we're here now. So I just want to say the reason I mentioned those ways to support this work is because I am very sure that at some point in not too distant future, any means by which to get support from the YouTube platform will be gone. At least, I expect that to happen to my channel. But so it's very important that the alternative formats, ways to donate are made available to everyone. And I appreciate all of you. I appreciate all of you, regardless if you donate. This is for everyone. We're a big family here. I have faith in God. His will be done. And in that sense, this work will be supported by those who can and feel led to do so. And then the rest of the folks will be carried along with that. Everyone can help out by offering your prayers for the work that's done here. Also, in the chat there, use this chat as a prayer list. People having trouble, people having problems, or just, of someone who needs a little help, right there. You've got this chat room here. Let it be your platform for a prayer list. Because that is the essence, the purpose of this channel. This is why I'm here, to do that, to offer that. All right, let's talk about what we've got here. Like, once again, Patrick Wood, the author of a book called Technocracy, The Hard Road to World Order, a Christian. This is his website. And this article comes from Technocracy.news. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Yeah. How's that going to work out? This satanic mantra was created by the early 1900s occultist Aleister Crowley. Some might say Crowley. I say Crowley. I think Ozzy Osbourne says Crowley. Mr. Crowley. Who was arguably one of the most evil men who ever lived in the 20th century. Now, that's quite a claim, don't you think? One of the most evil men who ever lived? How do you justify? I mean, how do you measure such a thing? Right? What a title. He must be proud. I imagine he's probably not. As the world turns to self-centered lawlessness, it is no shock that satanic chaos reigns supreme as mobs destroy America. As what? As mobs destroy America. Yes. Now, maybe some of you could be new here tonight. There have been some new subscribers here lately. There's a video that called White America, Black America, the setup and the con job. You might want to watch that. All I did there was I shared an article from John Rappaport, and it is on point. And I gave it a reading with a Christian lens. We looked at that article through a Christian lens. Chaz, or the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone in Seattle, for example, lawless and chaotic. Progressive liberalism, it makes its own law as it goes forward. Mobs of looters and destroyers. You get the point. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Yeah, whatever you want to do here in this autonomous zone. The 20th century Christian philosopher Francis Schaeffer. Wow. Anyways, Francis Schaeffer. Where'd my book go? Oh, it's around here somewhere. There it is. Francis Schaeffer. Anyway, it's up there. I can't reach it. 20th century philosopher Francis Schaeffer, who we are using one of his books for our 25 Essentials of Christian Doctrine study series that we're doing here on this channel. So that name comes up here quite a bit. He noted in 1978 that when the natural cohesion of the Christian consensus in society disappears, the chaos that results will ultimately require the imposition of an external control by a manipulative elite. So, okay, you turn the mobs loose and you let them tear it all down. Meanwhile, the group, this establishment, these manipulative elite, they just sit back and wait for the right opportunity to sweep in and exact their will or enact their will. And yes, Schaeffer did use the term technocrat to describe such an elite. Now, we are in the middle, the opinion here in this article anyway, says we are in the middle of Act 1 of the Second American Civil War. Act 2 could be right around the corner. Here's a comment from Vladimir Lenin, Russian communist, if you didn't know. He said, there are decades when nothing happens. And there are weeks when decades happen. That is where we stand today. We are in one of those periods where leaps and bounds are being accomplished in a day or in a few days, and especially over the past, let's just call it the past 5 months. The past 5 months. Just let's say since February. We have seen maybe a decade or even more worth of totalitarian implementation. It's all happening right now. And this is our opportunity. We have the greatest opportunity for evangelism on the planet right now than we've had since the first century. People are utterly confused. They don't know where to look. They don't know where to turn. Guess what, folks? We have the answer. We can help them with that. The old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters, says Antonio Gramsci, father of cultural Marxism. What we've been watching play out on the streets of America's cities the last 2 weeks, for example, are textbook revolutionary tactics. In other words, you're seeing cultural Marxism manifest in your streets. Problem is, too few Americans have read the textbook. It's important to understand the scenes playing on stage number 1, the streets of Seattle, Minneapolis, Portland, Atlanta, and many other cities, as ugly as they may be, are only the first phase of the revolution. This is the prelude, which serves to disrupt and distract. It is but the opening act for what comes next. Now, it's very important. They point out right here, it's important. It's not a foregone conclusion that we will proceed to Act 2 of this demonstration, this operation. But this Act 2, if it comes, will be much more violent and ugly than Act 1. But right now, as the writer says, from where I stand, it's looking like a 50-50 chance that we will see this Act 2. Activist ringleaders with Black Lives Matter and Antifa have been hired to play the role of disruptor. Black Lives Matter is not bashful about its role as a communist agitator, only marginally connected to Black lives. Bingo, right there. Now on this channel, while it lasts, I would just say, while it lasts, there's a video dealing with Black Lives Matter in their own words. And in their own words, in their own manifesto, from their website, you can see very clearly this is not a movement about Black lives. It's a movement about cultural Marxism. And the movement has been, if it was pure when it was started, has been co-opted very clearly by a Marxist agenda. And part of that, one of the reasons you can see that very clearly is because they absolutely seek to destroy the nuclear family, the idea of a father and a mother raising children. They want to blow it up. It's outdated. You don't need that anymore. We've got a new way for you. It's called chaos and mayhem. Real freedom, right? Real freedom and liberty comes from chaos and mayhem. That's their idea. So you check out that video while it lasts, or you can just go right to the website, blacklivesmatter.com, and read for yourself and what they believe. You'll see. It's not a movement that's out there to uplift our brothers and sisters. It's there to usher in a Marxist world order. Just as they say here, under the What We Believe tab on the website, displaying the communist clenched fist and referring to repeatedly to its comrades, openly names the prime target of its disruption when it states, right here, word for word, it says, "We disrupt Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable." Anything missing there? Do you notice anything missing there? We extended families and villages, blah, 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 collectively care for one another, blah, 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 especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, and children are comfortable. What about dad? What about dad? Where's dad? Where's the father? No, there's no need for that. Can't have a father. You see why this movement is not about uplifting Black lives, or any lives for that matter. In other words, you mothers and parents, give us your children. This should not be surprising, for it is the family that is the foundational building block of Western civilization, the very thing BLM and Antifa are warring against. Don't let those names, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, don't let them, they don't mean very much. They're just placeholders, little markers out there. The movement exists above them. They are the tools. They are the boots on the ground. Without God and without strong families, Western civilization is no longer recognizable. It devolves into chaos and dissolves. Do what thou wilt. That is the whole of the law. That's the whole of the law. Do whatever you feel like you want to do. In its place will be those paragons of virtue and freedom, such as the Chaz, Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, which has set up shop in Seattle, claiming state sovereignty and no police presence. And I haven't been there personally, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on there, but it's fairly easy to predict what will happen, just based on the people who are in charge. This is perhaps the boldest step in U.S. history by a Marxist group staking a claim to separate and sovereign status apart from the United States. They're staking a claim to separate sovereign status apart from the United States. If these autonomous zones spread to other cities, look out. We could be headed for deeper, fuller revolution that moves to the next phase. What is that next phase? All-out civil war. This is not the time for pretending like it can't happen. Besides Seattle, the cities most ripe for making the leap into separate Marxist zones are the Democrat strongholds of Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles on the West Coast, Minneapolis and Chicago on the interior, followed by the predictable culprits on the East Coast. This would validate what we suspected for years, that we no longer have one America, but rather two Americas, one based on the principles of private property and individual freedom found in the U.S. Constitution, and the other based on a neo-Marxist utopian idea of collectivism, strictly regulated speech, and no freedom of religion or right to bear arms. How about utopia, folks? What is that utopia that we hear about? Let's poll a Webster. We like to go and check out the American Dictionary of the English Language from 1828. We get an idea of this word utopian. What has it meant? We get an idea that, it's a heaven on earth. This is heaven for man. Man can create his own heaven. The idea of utopia. Well, what does it mean here? It says ideal, chimerical. Let's define that word too. Chimerical. Merely imaginary. Fanciful, fantastic, wildly or vainly conceived. We're talking about utopia here, folks. Don't let the idea of utopia, when they say it or when it comes up, don't let it get twisted that this is some kind of actual good thing where people can thrive. No, it's just an imaginary, fanciful, fantastic, wildly and vainly conceived idea that has or can have no existence except in thought. This utopia cannot exist in the real world. It's like children building a treehouse and pretending, playing house, pretending that it's not based in reality. And it says here also, not well founded. In other words, it is not based in truth, this idea of utopia. The agents of this other breakaway America appear to be laying a trap for President Trump, who right now represents traditional free America. Whatever you think about Donald Trump, whatever your opinion on him is, and here, you're not going to get right or left paradigm, political discourse. Not going to happen here. Not interested in it. Left that a long time ago. But what we see today is there are people aligning against Donald Trump. And these people happen to be the old war hawks, the old neoconservatives from the 90s and 9/11. This is John Bolton's job right now is to play a role to make President Trump, to make it look like President Trump doesn't know what he's doing. Just to come out strong against him. Why is that? Because the agents of this other breakaway America appear to be laying a trap for Trump, who now represents traditional free America. Donald Trump hasn't been a war hawk. You have to admit, when you look at what's going on, that he has not created an environment where military contracts are as valuable as they once were. And that makes him angry. If you remember what the PNAC document is, the Project for a New American Century, this document that was written about a year before 9/11, that predicted 9/11 by saying that we need this new Pearl Harbor in order to establish a context for never-ending wars so that we can constantly be at war. You see, that's the essence of World War III. It's not declared. It just is. It just becomes the normal state of affairs. And that has been interrupted. So what you see now, you're seeing the establishment at work. This is not a left, progressive, liberal movement only. This is also, this movement, this chaos is also coming from the right. And then we see it now as the neocons start to stir. They're grumbling. They're not very happy. Business has not been good for the past 3 years. And they're looking to change it. So they join hands with the Marxists. Why? Because it's good for business. Right now, it's good for business. And they all believe in this alchemical, Freemasonic ideal of chaos and bringing a new order out of chaos. And they will create the chaos so that they can control what the new order is. That will be their attempt. It says here, Trump can't handle this rebellion in one of two ways. He can stand back and let them hopefully drown in their own ineptitude. Now, that doesn't say much for the neocons, who are not inept. Or he can call in the military to crush them under the Insurrection Act. Either choice carries its own set of risks and possibly payoffs. Every day that this autonomous zone exists at the pleasure of the Seattle city government it forces the Democrats to own it and look like idiots in the run-up to a November election. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you agree? How do you feel when you see someone come out in support of the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone? Or when you see someone come out in support of burning the cities down? How does that make you feel? What do you see? When someone comes out in support of that, what does your instinct tell you there? What about as a Christian? When you look at the world through a Christian lens? What does it tell you? What it tells me is these people are exposing themselves. Today, more than ever, we are able to see just exactly who is on what side, who is playing for which team, and how this whole thing works out. Right now, we can identify who these players are. And folks, whether it's Republican or Democrat, remember who it was over the past 5 months. Remember who it was that backed the lockdown. Remember who it was that stood strong for the destruction of Western society. Remember who it was that did that when this comes around. Specifically, I don't care so much about a national election, but in your hometown. In your hometown, pay attention to who it is that's taking the company line, that's not thinking for themselves, that's not looking at real science. Keep it in mind when it comes around next time and vote them out in your hometown. Get them out of there. Still have a choice. You still have a choice in your local government. And I get comments sometimes. People say, "Oh, look, you don't see it. You don't understand. It's all a stage play. It's all." Listen, that does you no good. It does you no good to look out there and say that everything is fake. All that does is prevent you from dealing with reality a little longer. Certainly, things are produced. Things are put together. Certainly, some things happen that are not the way they're reported. But what we do here, and what is a fruitful endeavor is to pay attention to the narrative, regardless of whether it's really happening that way. What are they saying? And take what they're saying and try to garner from it whatever you can about where they're trying to take society. Every day that this autonomous zone exists at the pleasure of the Seattle city government forces the Democrats to own it and look like idiots. But make no mistake, there is risk involved in allowing such blatant Marxist insurrection to take root on U.S. soil. Remember, in these kind of events, the toothpaste doesn't go back in the tube. It's out now. It's in the world. It's here. It has been manifested into the world. These spirits don't go back. They're here now. The police-free no-gun zone or no-go zones within the United States have the potential to evolve into something more dangerous. Talk about abolishing police sounds kind of ridiculous on its face. But what it is, it's a clever Marxist snare. History shows us that leftists and communists are not and never have been anti-police. Take that point right there, folks. Take that point right there. Marxists, communists have never been anti-police. They are very much pro-police. But they want to be in charge of the police. So wherever police are going to be, if it happens, where police are defunded and they're moved out, whenever there's a vacuum, just watch out, because the thing that comes in to fill that vacuum many times is far worse than the thing that was just removed. Marxists love police and are in fact known for setting up police states. Now that's the truth. That's reality. So don't buy the narrative that they want to get rid of police. They just want to create something that's worse. And they're using Black lives to try to make it happen. They're taking advantage, co-opting Black lives to try to make this happen. Just the same way in the Tuskegee experiment, where they took advantage of Black lives there, that's what they're doing right here. No different than the Tuskegee experiment. That was a massive syphilis experiment where 600 black men were given syphilis through a needle, and then their lives were charted. That was the experiment, to chart how the disease affects their lives for the rest of their lives. And most of these men were never told what their diagnosis was. Evil, my friends, pure evil. This is no different. This is no different. Black lives, black people are being used in this sense once again. So I guess, folks, having a video removed off of YouTube, I guess it hasn't really gotten through my head yet, has it? It hasn't caused me to start carefully crafting my rhetoric, I guess. I guess I'm you have to tell the truth. You have to call things the way they are. I don't know any other way to do it here. But these Marxists clearly love police. They just want their police to be in control of American streets, not the police of the old order, as governed by the United States Constitution. Now, I might differ with that comment there just a little bit. I'm not so sure that the police that we've seen in the last decade or so are actually... there's a video here called Who's Protecting Your Freedoms? Just check that out sometime if you want to know my position on the current state of police. Why do they need military equipment? Well, I guess now we see, because a war has been planned. And now the war is starting to happen. But through the 1033 program where the military is required to make available to local police these military weaponry, tools. Just check that video out sometime if you want to know a little more. The essence of that video is go over 9 essential freedoms and liberties that have been lost since 9/11. Now, there have been many more since that video was done. So what is to stop this in their autonomous zones, or potentially in an entire United States city under the protection of radical Democrat governors? Pay attention for that to happen. Pay attention for an entire city to be made some sort of autonomous zone. Atlanta, Georgia seems like a viable candidate right now, doesn't it? Seems like it could be one. There's a lot of people there to take advantage of, and that's what's sad. And that's what pisses me off, and I can't help it. So I come here and I talk about it. These radical governors, mayors, and city councils who have sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States are replacing their police with their own militias who swear an oath to uphold the Marxist principles of the breakaway Marxist city-states. Is that what we see happening? Just asking a question. Is that what it looks like? What if the city declares its allegiance not to the Republic of the United States of America, but to the United Nations? That's where we're headed, folks. It's not as if they don't really have it. Now, the people in the streets, they don't know what the ultimate plan is. They're just screaming to end racism, right? Because you can do that, right? You can end racism. Really? Can you? Can you really end racism? Well, that seems to be the mantra. That's the reason. That's the way. That is the context for what we see going on right now. No, they can't get rid of racism. You can't end racism any more than you can stop evil in the world. But very soon what we will see, it seems like, coming around the corner, is this point that's made here. What if these, not the rioters, but the mayors, the actual people in authority in these regional areas, these local governments, what if they just stand up one day and say, listen, we're not pledging any allegiance to the Republic of the United States of America. Our allegiance is to the United Nations. Does that sound crazy? Stay tuned. Specifically, their allegiance will be in the United Nations agenda for the 21st century. Agenda 21, Sustainable Development. Agenda 2030, Green New Deal, blah, blah, blah. All the same thing. It's a new urban agenda to get all the people out of the country, off the land, and to stack them and pack them, tracking and traceable smart grid communities. It says here, we could ostensibly end up with breakaway city-states, nations within a nation. It says here, is it a mere coincidence that the family of George Floyd has called on the United Nations to intervene in the criminal case involving their son's alleged murder? This is not coincidence, folks. These poor people who've had something awful happen in their lives are not calling on the United Nations because they thought of it. No, they got Al Sharpton in their ear. Who does Al Sharpton serve? The agenda for the 21st century, which is a global, technocratic, Marxist utopia. The new global police force would then arrive. Complements of the United Nations, NATO, or some other global body. Folks, we're on the edge. We're right before seeing blue helmets in the streets of the United States of America. Don't be surprised by it when it happens. That's where it heads. The new police could constitute an assemblage of thugs recruited from leftist paramilitary organizations within the United States. Groups like the New Black Panthers, the Nation of Islam, or Jamaat al-Fuqra. Whatever the case, you can bet that the primetime actors in the flowering American Revolution will not be the useful idiots that we see burning down buildings on the nightly news. As Antonio Gramsci, the 20th century Italian communist and father of modern cultural Marxism, said, once again, the old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time for monsters. What kind of language is that? Is that the serpent language, or is that language that's in line with God's will? The role of the monsters is the formation of the mob. Anarchy is always the prelude, the opening act to the revolution, not the main attraction or the end game. And now I've had a problem recently with them using the term anarchy as they talk about what you see happening in the cities, because up until recently anyway, the rulers were still there. They just were choosing not to act. Anarchy simply means no rulers, without rulers. It doesn't mean no rules. It doesn't mean no laws. It means no rulers. Comes to the word archon, meaning ruler, leader, God, small g. But anyway, we have seen something that looks more like anarchy lately with these autonomous zones, areas where they're, well, anyway, it's called anarchy, but you know what happens? As it always happens, very quickly, someone rises up to the top and becomes the ruler. So that rapper, the guy out there, whoever became the sort of the leader over the Chaz, over the autonomous zone there, they have a ruler. Don't act like you don't have a ruler. You have a ruler. You have people there who are going to tell you what to do. Anarchy, my friends, is essentially anti-Christian. Now, that's something that I had to get beat through my own head many years ago. Because to say you're an anarchist, no rulers, is to deny God. Is to deny God and His law. It is to deny natural law. The mob is swelling in ranks, taking over portions of formerly great cities and claiming to be something that they are not, which is actual rulers of slices of American real estate. This is merely for show. The role of the mob is to destabilize and cause fear and confusion in the populace, softening them up for the main event. They won't last for long, but they do create a problem that must be dealt with one way or the other. The illusion of peace in our inner cities was always a mirage. As we've seen, all it takes is one viral video played over and over and over, devoid of context, in the propaganda media, and boom, the demons rush in. Good people flee to safer ground. Just as the economic devastation of CV-19 could have been avoided if folks hadn't bought the globalist media propaganda about the need for lockdowns, the physical devastation of our cities could have been avoided after the tragic death of George Floyd. Instead of moving quickly to crush the mob, we saw mayors and governors enable it. They allowed the fake news media to legitimize the rabble-rousers of lawlessness. Mayors like Bill de Blasio in New York, Jacob Frey in Minneapolis, Keisha Lance Bottoms in Atlanta, Jenny Durkin in Seattle have crowned the disruptors as protesters and now seek to negotiate with them. More than that, the mayor in Seattle called it a party. She called it the summer of love, right? So very, very clearly, people who live in Seattle, the mayor has exposed herself. You know who she is now. You know exactly what team she's on. She's on the team of United Nations. She's on the team of Agenda 20, the agenda for the 21st century. She's on that team. She doesn't care about you. But then that's assuming these mayors want things to end well. What if they have an ulterior motive, which we've just pointed out here? We know what their ulterior motive is, in which the mob becomes weaponized in the Marxist Democrats' ongoing political war against Donald Trump, at least in this writer's opinion. I think it's deeper than that. I do see a movement to make things so miserable that somehow people will go and vote against Trump. But I don't stay there very long. It goes higher than that. This is much bigger. This is much bigger than Donald Trump. Although, as I've said a couple times here already, which surprises even myself, Donald Trump does seem, in most cases anyway, so far, to be not a neocon, not a war hawk, and to somewhat be aware of this false environmentalist movement, the climate change idealism. Nonetheless, he certainly was right there in the middle of the pandemic. He's been out there furthering that narrative. I don't know how to explain that, but I would have to assume that at some level he is also just part of the establishment still. So then it makes perfect sense to coddle the mob and keep it intact, to send in food and supplies to the new nation of Chaz. Of course, they'll support it because it serves the agenda. It serves the narrative. The fact that these anarchists are now bold enough to plow. Now, these are not anarchists. These people in the streets we see, they're not the anarchists. So I don't particularly agree with that qualification. But anyway, now that they're bold enough to ply their craft openly, and we're talking about these mayors and city council people, once again, too, they're plying their craft openly. I have to do this. I can't help it. We haven't done this in a couple weeks. Just because of that sentence right there, we have to cover what they said right here. The fact that these people are now bold enough to ply their craft openly is telling. Their craft. So I have to I have to take you back to the book of Daniel, chapter 8. Daniel chapter 8. We go down to somewhere around, let's see, we start around verse 20. There it is, starting at verse 23. Daniel chapter 8, starting at verse 23. Let me just give you this on the screen here. Now tell me if this doesn't make perfect sense. Daniel, we know to be a prophetic text. Most of the commonly accepted eschatology will come from books in the Old Testament like this, Daniel. So Daniel chapter 8, let's start here. As the horn was broken in place for the case, so we're doing the prophetic symbolism now. And as we get to verse 23, what's happened before verse 23 is symbolism has been shown of how to identify these nations and these leaders. But listen to what is said about these leaders. It says, at the latter end of their kingdom, when the transgressors, when these men of renown, when these technocrats, when these, in my opinion anyway, have reached their limit, a king of bold face, and it says over here in the King James, a king of fierce countenance, a king of bold face, who understands riddles, dark sentences. That's riddles. He knows how to use the language. He knows how to deceive people with words and language. That's why we pay attention to what they say. That's why when we see these things play out in the media, we don't just jump back and say, it's all fake, it's all staged, and run back in our holes. No, we pay attention to the language they're using because they know how to use dark sentences, which are riddles. They know how to use the language. They know how to deceive with language. They know how to cast spells. They know how to apply their craft. And it says here in verse 24, his power shall be great, but not by his own power. So we know about what we know about the Antichrist is that this will be one man who will come into the world and have the full power of Satan working through him. The only one to have that in history. This is what, according to Scripture, what God will allow to occur. His power shall be great, but not by his own power. So he will be carried along with the spirit of Satan. And he shall cause fearful destruction. Over here in the King James it says, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully. What is that word? He shall destroy wonderfully. People will be amazed at the power of this man, of this person. His power shall be great, but not by his own power, and he shall cause fearful destruction, and he shall succeed in what he does. It says over here in the King James, he shall prosper and practice, and he shall destroy the mighty and holy people. English Standard Version says, and shall destroy mighty men and the people who are the saints. That is us, my friends. That is the Christians. Verse 25 says, and through his policy, also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. English Standard says, by his cunning he shall make deceit prosper. All right, deception, Deception is the order of the day, my friends. Scientism is all around. No one who's telling you how to live your life right now is doing it because the science says so. They're doing it because it's deception. And deception will prosper as a matter of fact. And in his own mind he shall become great. King James says he will magnify himself in his heart. That is pride, my friends. That is definitely, obviously, pride. And in these movements, we see a lot of pride. We see a lot of man-centered thinking. His own mind, he shall become great in his own mind. Without warning, he shall destroy many. Over here in the King James, it says one of the most important pieces in this prophetic scripture. He says, and by peace shall destroy many. How? What does he mean by and peace they shall destroy many? It means at a time when people don't quite expect it. Listen, peace, we've just come through a period of peace. It might not have been comfortable. It might not have felt good. It might not have felt right. But it was peaceful. So peace is not always a time of happiness, is it? So by peace shall destroy many. And we also hear through Scripture that, before the second coming, when things are terrible, that there would be, before things get so bad, that there would be a time of peace. Now, what kind of peace? We're not so sure. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes. It says here, and he shall even rise up against the prince of princes, and he shall be broken. But by no human hand. He shall be broken without hand. Who will break him? So that is the good news there at the end, is that this force, this person, we see right now, we are seeing the stage set for someone, a person, a singular entity to walk forward and say, I have the answers. I will restore peace. I will give you your normal world back. To make promises, to use dark sentences, riddles, to deceive you with language, to step forward. We see it now. This is who knows? Now, I'm not, you don't have to accept this eschatology. This eschatology is complicated. And no one knows for sure exactly how these events will play out. In fact, prophecy is conditional on how people react. The story of Jonah and the Ninevites tells us that, or gives us the indication that prophecy can be conditional. Not that God won't do what he said he would do. It just might happen in a little different way. Now, once again, you don't have to accept this eschatology. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is trying to identify the world we're living in right now. Where do we stand in the stream of time? And this is one way to do it. We can, by looking at Scripture and reading these articles and trying to understand where we stand today, we can see where we are in the stream of time. If you are a person of faith, someone who believes that God will do what he said he will do. Demons are rushing in to fill the void. Morality gets twisted and redefined, and things can move quickly. As Vladimir Lenin said, once again, there are decades when nothing happens, where things just go along, not much happening. And then there are weeks when decades happen. We've seen that. We have seen decades of things that would have taken decades to get done politically have been done in weeks, in just a few months, right here in the United States of America. But actually, there was a lot happening behind the scenes in those quiet decades when things seemed to not be happening, the period roughly from the end of World War II up until now. The enemy, your adversary, in fact, has been inserting his culture warriors into positions of influence, while the church has slept and focused elsewhere. But now the chickens are coming home to roost. And they're ambushing police officers, toppling historical monuments, censoring historic books and films from America's past. The anarchists on the streets who lack the morals of humanity, do what thou wilt, is a wholly immoral mantra. And they behave abhorrently. They enjoy the full support of billionaires. These people in the streets furthering this agenda have the support of billionaires. We know that, don't we? We know that there has to be funding behind this. Billionaires in the media, billionaires in entertainment industries, as well as billionaires from corporate America. And all of these, Hollywood, corporate America, they're falling all over themselves to virtue signal. They want to say, we're in compliance. How many of you who might work for maybe a school system, maybe you're some sort of professional and you hold a license to do some job or something in your state, and you have a board of examiners or a board of directors that govern, that particular business that you're in or career that you're in. How many of you have received letters in the mail or emails just out of nowhere saying, this licensing body stands up in solidarity with Black Lives Matter movement? How many of you have received something like that from maybe your boss, the corporation that you work for, or the licensing body that licensed you to do the job you might do in your hometown? The example I have is my sister is an esthetician, skincare, and so she has to be licensed to do that in the state. So the licensing board sent out a message, sent out an email to everyone, not to tell them, we hope we can get you back up to 100% very soon. No, they emailed everyone to let them know we stand in solidarity with BLM. That's the message. What in the world do these licensing bodies have to do with it? But we're seeing exactly what they have to do with it. You either join with that movement or they will take you down. They will cancel you out of existence. Cops and even National Guardsmen have been taking a knee and bowing in submission to the mob. It says here, sports legends like NFL quarterback Drew Brees have apologized for standing up for the American flag. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell apologized for not letting players kneel during the national anthem last season. And the National Soccer League says it will allow its players to also disrespect the flag. What do you think about that? Now, the flag cannot be idolized. We cannot turn the flag into an idol. But that is exactly what's happening by this movement. By taking a knee, they're making it about the flag. It becomes an idol because those who want to defend it will somehow be seen as idolizers. So you see how the issue gets divided down the middle under a false paradigm. Somehow, if you don't support taking a knee during the anthem, you hate America. That's a false paradigm. In other words, it's not necessarily true. It's not a true statement. There's more than two options there. But for the narrative, there must be. For the Hegelian dialectic, there must be either or. You're either with us or you're against us, right? That's Hegelian dialectic. HBO has temporarily eliminated the classic 1939 film Gone with the Wind, claiming that allowing people to see it without explanatory notes would be racist. You see, after all, you're just a child and you don't know how to think for yourself. So we're going to think for you. We're going to have to show you how to watch a movie from 1939. We're going to have to, you can't be allowed to watch that yourself. No. Wow. I mean, this is, I don't know if you guys, maybe you remember being in elementary school or something, and you remember where there was just a few kids in the classroom who just were always causing trouble, and it affected everyone in the class, and you're just like, really? Every day, these kids, they want to cause trouble, and then we all have to, and we all don't get to go out to the playground. Or we all have to eat our lunch quietly without talking because these two over here can't help but act a fool. That's kind of what it feels like right now in the country. We are all being subjected to policies and guidelines that don't have anything to do with us. We common folk can no longer be trusted to watch an old movie without their warning labels and filters. How does that make you feel? Are we going to stand for it? In perhaps the most ridiculous example of just how rabid these Antifa, BLM anarchists can be, they defaced the monument to the 54th Army Unit that served as the first black regiment to fight for their freedom in the Civil War, as depicted in the movie Glory. Is this movement sincerely there to support Black lives? No, there's contradictions all over the place. In Philadelphia, the self-proclaimed social justice warriors spray painted a memorial to abolitionist Matthias Baldwin. They even turned their wrath against the Lincoln Memorial, defacing a monument to the president who freed slaves. This just proves that their concerns have nothing to do with George Floyd, Black lives, or racial justice. Now, we've said that time and time here again. This is not a new assertion for us here watching this channel. It has everything to do with destroying a nation. You do that by erasing its history. You've heard something called year zero, the idea of something you might have heard called year zero. It's an idea, let's just say, for example, when you go into a country and you take it over and you're going to establish a new regime, a new way of life, everything old has to be gone. We're starting fresh right here, year zero. Nothing from the past even exists. It can't, because what we're instituting here is brand new. It's a different path. It's a completely different path. So that is known as something that's known as year zero. We're starting over. That is a communist ideal, to start over with no history, which is wacko. You can't pretend like history didn't happen. Even as Christians, when we submit to Jesus Christ and we become Christians, we still remember our sins. Right? We remember what we did. You can't wipe that out. The sins, the responsibility for them is wiped out through God's grace. But we don't forget our sins. They're there to remind us. Remember what God's law is there for. God's law is there to show us our sin, to show us where we fall short. Vladimir Lenin understood this very well. Prophet Muhammad understood this as well. You see, Prophet Muhammad was, if he existed today, would be a cultural Marxist. Today's radicals are serving in Act 1 of the Second American Revolution, what could very well be the coming Civil War. When Act 2 arrives, the throwaway radicals we now see in the streets, paid for with Soros and Rockefeller money, will be rounded up and discarded. Bingo. There's what you take away from this message. Do what thou wilt. The whole of the law. All this, we're gonna make it happen. We're gonna end racism. These people that are out in the streets fighting on behalf of this globalist movement, they will be the first people to be locked up or assassinated, whenever, if and when the new order is established. Why? Why do you say that? Think through history. Whenever a force would invade another land, another people, and there would be a war, the force that comes in and wins, or you get spies. You try to recruit people from the group you're trying to conquer. You recruit people from that group. You co-opt them. You bring them in and co-opt them, and you turn them into your spies so they can go work for you and help you win the war. Now, what happens is when the war is over and the land has been conquered, those people from the conquered country who helped the conquering force are the first people to be lined up and shot. Why? Because you can't trust them. They're not loyal. That's what we see in the streets today. And these people, sadly, because there are real human beings out there who've been taken up by this movement, they don't realize that. They don't realize they've been co-opted and manipulated and lied to. And they don't realize that if and when the new order is fully established, they're the first people that will be booted out, locked up, because they can't be trusted. They will have fulfilled their purpose, rounded up and discarded. And a new authority, either from the United Nations or some other unit of anti-American globalism, will be sent in to restore order. That, eschatologically speaking, that could be an Antichrist figure. That looks like an opportunity for an Antichrist to stand up and do just what we said there from Daniel chapter 8. But let's pray. It never gets to that point. And that's something we can do. Prayer is the most powerful weapon, the most powerful tool in the universe. And right now we need to be praying that this thing doesn't go down this way. Let us pray for more time. Time to restore order by dealing with the root cause of this rebellion. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, and I think it too. I don't want more time. I want Jesus back now. I want him tonight. I want him to return today. This is completely out of control. This is nonsense. I want Jesus to come back now. And, as a Christian, that's a righteous kind of a thought, right? I'm with you there. I understand. But while we're here in this world, we're here to do God's will. And right now, our job would be to pray for people to be spared. Let's pray for more time to save more people, more time to bring more people in to the truth, more time to restore order by dealing with the root cause of this rebellion. The root cause is none other than the spiritual anarchy that was allowed to flourish beneath the surface and out of sight of everyday Americans. We sat in our churches singing nice-sounding hymns while the spiritual anarchists infiltrated and took over every segment of our culture. We took a knee, in a sense, and we refused to apply our Christianity to life outside the church walls. Some say God judges a nation like that. But this author says, I don't think that's the case. He simply walks away from a nation that no longer welcomes him as the central figure of its national life. Also can be true. Let's not let that be us. Let's join together in prayer as Christians who no longer live in a Christian nation, we can still pray for this nation and hopefully restore order and get more time to bring more people into the truth. That's the war. That's the spiritual war. Essentially, out of everything that we've talked about here, the most important piece to remember is that we are in the middle of a spiritual war. What are the stakes in the spiritual war? It's not freedom and liberty. It's not the flag. The stakes in a spiritual war are the souls of people, of God's people, God's created beings, the souls. That's what's at stake. Satan doesn't care how he gets you. Satan doesn't care who or what you have faith in, just as long as you don't have faith in God. Just as long as he can convince you to turn your back on God and take some other path, that's the victory for Satan. That's the essence of the spiritual war. The spiritual war has nothing to do with freedom, nothing to do with the United States. It has everything to do with the souls of God's children. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to be in God's will. We're here to allow God to work through us as we work in the world to bring more people to the truth, as we allow the Holy Spirit to work through us, to guide us in that process. And what about this artificial intelligence? Days of Noah and I have been working a little bit on a new some topics for a new video that will a new stream that we'll do pretty soon, a new collaboration, talking about artificial intelligence. What is it? Is it really here? What does it mean? So pay attention for that. This is going to be a very good collaboration stream that'll be coming up in a few days. Days is in charge of setting up the time, or he's going to be the one who establishes the time when we do that stream, and he'll be promoting that on his channel. I'll be promoting it here, so I'm doing that now by letting you know to keep your eyes open on the Days of Noah channel for that, because we're going to go deep into explaining what is the nature of AI right now. What does it really mean? What's behind it? Does it exist? Does artificial intelligence in fact exist? Or are you actually intended to be the artificial intelligence? Think about that for a minute. If all we really have is machine learning and artificial intelligence is a notion too far in the future to actually perceive, then what is all this talk about artificial intelligence? Transhumanism. You, my friend, are intended to be the artificial intelligence. And what that essentially means is to get you to turn your back on God and to take up all the seductions and desires of this world and to try to live forever in this world. So anyway, an AI-powered simulation run by technology executive says that coronavirus could infect as many as 2.5 billion people within 45 days and kill as many as 53 million of them. Fortunately, however, conditions of infection and detection are changing, which in turn changes incredibly important factors that the AI isn't aware of. Here's what you need to know about artificial intelligence, folks. As it stands today, it doesn't think. It's impossible. That doesn't exist. Not so far. We'll get into more detail about this in the stream that I do with Days of Noah. There always is a human being. If artificial intelligence runs on algorithms, well, how do algorithms run? Algorithms must have values inserted into them so that they can operate. For example, if you think about maybe the YouTube algorithm, if it exists, I mean, if that's a real thing, how does it work? Well, it has values input into it that it looks for and reacts to. But the values are still input into the algorithm by the human being. So it's a deception. It's a deception. The idea of artificial intelligence as an independent, sentient being making moral decisions is a deception. There's always There's always a man behind the curtain pulling the levers. There has to be. It doesn't work any other way. And the author of this article says we are probably safer than we think, anyway, from this idea of artificial intelligence. Rational or not, fear of CV has spread around the world. People are buying gas masks. Surgical quality masks are selling out all over the place. A news site that tracks infections globally says we are currently at about 25,000 infected, 500 dead, 1,000 recovered, something like that. And all this prompted James Ross, co-founder of fintech startup Hedge Chatter, to build a model. Now, the video that was removed off my channel was the one about models. All I did was show, here's what a model is, and it's not science. It's just math, and people are plugging in values that don't mean anything. That's what it said in the video. And it wasn't my opinion. I used sources. Sources who know what they're talking about. It says here, a quote, I started with day over day growth using publicly available data released by China. Then took that data and dumped it into an artificial intelligence neural net using a recurrent neural network model and ran the simulation 10 million times. That output dictated the forecast for the following day. Once the following day's output was published, I grabbed that data, added it to the training data, and reran the model 10 million times. The results so far have successfully predicted the following day's publicly released numbers with 3%, within 3%. And the results are shocking and horrific, as we can see here. That the cases and the deaths would just be into the millions. From 50,000 infected and 1,000 deaths after a week to 200,000 and almost 4,500 deaths after 2 weeks. The numbers keep growing as each infected person infects others in turn. In 30 days, the model says 2 million could die, and in just 15 more days, the death toll skyrockets. Is that true? Is all that real? Is that something that we really, because it comes from the AI, because it comes from the model, should we cower in fear? Should we lock ourselves down and shelter in place? The model doesn't know every factor. Remember, the models, the algorithms, the values must be input by fallible human beings. Not just fallible human beings, but human beings with an agenda. Human beings that have a stake in whether or not the number is high. Multiple doctors and medical professionals say the good news is that the conditions and data fed into the neural network are changing. As those conditions change, the results will change massively. Now, the reason I'm bringing this article up right now is because clearly, recently, we're seeing in the news, or in the public consciousness, there's been a spike. There's been a spike in cases. Oh no, here we go, second wave time, hang 10. But is it true? If a high proportion of infected persons are asymptomatic or develop only mild symptoms, these patients may not be reported. So that's not all the data is not there. We've been over this time and time again. I don't even think it's necessary to go over this. We understand what we're seeing here is models and artificial intelligence being employed to scare the shit out of us, right? They want to scare us to death because that ultimately is the only ammunition that they have. They have no good argument for the world they want to establish, so they must create it. They must compel us to come along with it through fear. So that, just a little bit about that, because we see it all over the place. This back in the news, second wave. Well, isn't it very interesting? Just as soon as Donald Trump decides he's going to go out and do some campaign rallies, boom, here goes the cases. They're back up again, right? Come on, man. Come on, man. Don't give me that. All right. We've done what we need to do here. Let's talk. Let me talk to my people over here. Let's see what's going on. My friends. My good friends out here in the chat. 56 looking on. That's a good crowd. Thank you, my friends, for joining in to what we call here Armor of Truth Radio. This is show number 31. If I did a podcast, this is what it would be like, I guess. That's what this little show is all about. I guess I do a podcast. I don't know. Well, we have some issues with the chat freezing up here. Other people I was talking to recently said they're having trouble with their chat. Jesse Spots as well had some trouble with his chat. Everything seems to be going pretty well here. All right, let's back up about 15 minutes and see what you guys were talking about there, so we don't go back too far. We've hour and a half in on this. I really have to try to work on getting these streams down to a more digestible time frame, I'm sure, but I don't know. You guys let me know. Do you prefer when we go deep diving like this for a couple hours, or would you rather have these things at a nice tidy 1 hour? Now, this is not that's not. I'm not asking about the. I also do short, I guess, documentary type pieces. They're not documentaries, but they're just little information pieces that are more digestible, from 8-9 minutes, maybe up to 20 minutes. Not much more than 20 minutes long, because most of the time the general public don't want to watch something for more than 10 or maybe 5 or 10 minutes. So there's on this channel, for as long as it's allowed to be there anyway, there's a playlist called Short Films on the Faith, and there are some short films that you can take and share with people about apologetics issues, also about technocracy issues. All right, just making sure we're checking here, see if we've missed any super chats or anything like that. I think we're clear. All right, let's see what's going on out here, guys. I'm curious if anybody out there, though, does work in a specific field where you hold a license, and you have a board of, a licensing board. Have you gotten a message from them lately, just out of the blue, saying, "Hey, we stand in solidarity with the BLM movement"? I'm curious because I've seen that. Now, I used to be I work in speech therapy in this state, so I was on that, or I was. You work under a licensing agency or a licensing board when you work that way, but I've not done that now for several years. I don't know if I'm still. I don't know if they send me messages anymore or not. But just to make a point here to those who are looking on, a little bit about my history, about my past. I worked as a healthcare provider, working in speech therapy. I worked in the hospitals, in the emergency rooms, on the wards, definitely working directly with patients. Speech therapy in a hospital is more about swallowing. People who've had strokes, traumatic brain injuries, and you're helping them with their swallowing, because when you have a stroke, it affects the muscles that you swallow with, and you have to help people retone those muscles so that they don't acquire some type of aspiration pneumonia. So that's how it's like in the hospital. But out in the community, when I worked doing speech therapy with children, that is where I got red-pilled. As I went from house to house, from school to school, from child to child, the amount of children with autism. And as I went from house to house, I spoke to the families, one after another. And they all shared the same story. And I don't have to tell you what it is. You know what we're talking about. That's how I've come. That's part of the reason how I've come to you here today. That's one of the reasons that I talk about technocracy and social engineering and vaccines and all of this is because from experience. God led me through that, I guess, to have that experience so I could meet all of these people who had the same story. Anecdotal as it is, it's still evidence. There's Joseph Black up there. Says, God gave us dominion and we invited Satan and company in. That is a good point. That's a good point. And what about this, where we hear people saying out there, all lives matter? It's better just to not even go there, because once you go there, you've sort of fallen for the deception. You're trying to defend something that doesn't require defending. You've swallowed that jagged deception when you start saying things like that. I've done it. I mean, I'm guilty too. But let's think carefully about it. Here's Nana P's making a comment, something about I'd said earlier about being a patriot is idolized too. See there? It's a good point. You have to be very careful about letting that flag become some kind of an idol. That's not what being American is about. I am whoever you say I am says, yes, BLM is making girls get on their knees, kiss their boots. That's something we've seen happen. That is, and a message to anyone who might think it's a good idea to go out there and have people kneel down before you and say some kind of oath to you. You've not won anybody over by doing that. You've created for yourself an enemy. That person's not going to be loyal to you. They're scared of you. They can't be loyal to you in that sense. Here's Pam Pant. She's asking. She brought up something very important in a message this week. That look, folks, we are speaking of Aleister Crowley. You know what's going on. We're coming up on the summer solstice, which is a very, very busy and important time for the occultists, for those who run in those circles, and there are many, and those in elite circles, that is their ideology, that is their religion. Make no mistake about it. So what Pam is talking about there is let's be in prayer, especially very, very specifically for the next few days. The solstice occurs on or about the 20th, 21st, 22nd. It's that time of year when the sun appears to rise and set in the same place each day. It's because whatever cosmological model you buy, that's what appears to happen in the sky anyway. And so it's the opposite of the winter solstice around Christmas when it does the same thing. So what she's talking about here is something that's very important right now. Is a very good time for us to pray with a specific purpose during this time of the summer solstice, when the people who are working for the adversary are very active in pushing their, let's just say it like it is. This is when very important rituals are done. Now, some of you who are not familiar with all this, that might sound weird to you, but in fact, it is just the truth. Around the summer and winter solstice are very specific times when very specific rituals are done for very big outcomes. So now is a good time for all Christians to be in specific prayer, that the adversary be held back, be kept down. And she's mentioned too, one way to go about that is fasting and prayer. Now, whatever that means to you, consider doing it. So that's a good point. Thanks for mentioning that out there, Pam, because it's a very important point right now that we all should be aware of. And keep an eye on what's going on over the next few days and see if you see anything new and unusual. Melissa Benitez says, tomorrow's my birthday. Well, let's just stop right there. So, happy birthday. Let's all wish Melissa Benitez a happy birthday. That's good to know. She says, I pretty much fasted today, unaware. Smoothie and hot tea with lemon. All right. Well, happy birthday. And I appreciate your presence here and your participation. Kilito Brigante says, socialism is so bad. A lot of people really think they're doing whatever for the greater good or your own health. Therefore, they go to bed with a clean conscience, which is more dangerous, right? Deception. Essentially, what you're talking about there is deception. People are deceived. I am whoever you say I am, says, I asked my pastor about Freemasons. He said they are okay. Said his dad was one. Yeah, well, I would have to disagree with the fact that they're okay. Now, something very important to understand about Freemasonry are people who wear the ring anyway. It's not for us to assume that everyone who wears the ring is completely converted, because it takes a while. It takes a while. Initiations, many initiations, before someone really knows what they're doing. But now, the whole organization is foul. It's anti-Christian. So it's hard for me. Now, the organization is anti-Christian, but let's be very careful. It doesn't mean that everyone, what's considered the Blue Lodge anyway, people who are of lower degrees, who don't know quite everything that's involved there, it's not wise for us to assume that they're fully bought in. So let's keep it very clear that we love people and we try to work in God's will to bring people to the truth. But the comment, I don't quite yet know how to deal with that when you encounter a pastor who gives an opinion like that. I'm not quite sure how to deal with that yet. We have to assume that perhaps it's just ignorance. Maybe they don't really know. Maybe they don't really know what's at stake. They don't know what's actually going on there. And in that sense, just not much to comment on there. It's just, that's a tough issue. So thanks for mentioning that though, because it's a tough one. Essentially, there has to be a group in every community. If you're gonna affect some kind of outcome, some kind of greater outcome in a nation of people, you have to have people situated all over the place to do that. And that is one way you can look at Freemasonry, where these things that happen in certain cities, Freemasonry and police forces, police departments are very closely linked. If you want to advance through the police department, it's going to benefit you to become a Freemason. But let's be very clear that, like, just the same as when we consider the Roman Catholic Church, that we think of, that we rebuke the system and what the system stands for, and not the people, because the people must be redeemable souls. Every one of the people there is a soul that Jesus Christ died for, and in that sense, we need to be aware of that and compassionate to that degree. But we rebuke the system. And maybe we can be successful enough to pull people out of the system. I see Hef Brovner out there. What's up? It's good to see you again. Hef, once again, has been around here for a while. He's like maybe the foundational member or, viewer. Valor Magola says, Satan wants you to die in sin and misery. And indeed, Satan does. Satan doesn't care. He doesn't care whether you're successful or not. He just wants you to turn your back on God. He doesn't care if you're faithful to him. Satan doesn't care whether you're faithful to him or not. He just wants you to turn your back on God. It's that simple. Satan has nothing to offer you but death. God offers you life. Keep Steady says, now I'm convicted to do this fast together. Stonehenge is streaming for the first time in history, along with the state of the world right now. Ritual sacrifices and spell casting will be going on. Exactly, that's the point. That is the point right now. And it is interesting that that they're live streaming Stonehenge right now. Now, once again, essentially, that stone monument there doesn't mean anything one way or the other. It takes people. It takes people to be in league with Satan and his minions to give it the power that makes something good or bad about it. So remember, we have to be very careful about how we think about these things. Rebuke the system, but let's try to save the people. Valor Magola says, when is the show with days? Not quite sure yet. It'll be in a few days because we're really working on the outline for this, and what we were both talking about today is it's so important that when we talk about this stuff that we get it right, that we don't just come on and start talking blah 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 and trying to say things that are compelling and clickbaity. We want to get it right, so we're going through this for a few days now, working together to try to build up the outline for the show. But it's going to be very interesting dealing with artificial intelligence. What is artificial intelligence? What does it mean? What does it mean for us? Is it real? Is it actually here right now? How do we think about it? Is artificial intelligence evil? Even, we're going to deal with that. And of course, also alchemy, the process of alchemy. Going to deal with that because the way this world is being changed around us right now, it's being done through an alchemical process. And that is something we'll talk about in that video. I'll go into a little depth about what that actually means and how and why, when we see that being done in the world around us, that tells us who's responsible. We can see certain steps, and when we identify these steps, that tells us, that reveals, that exposes to us who it is that's actually doing this thing, who's actually involved. Kilito Brigante says, transhumanism. I remember the first time I heard that concept, I was like, really? Come on, people. You really want to do that? Yeah, it's to me, same thing for me. I'm like, that's never sounded like a good idea, transhumanism. But think of it this way, folks. There are people who don't know Jesus Christ. And when they don't know Jesus Christ, and they don't know that Jesus Christ has risen from the dead. They think it's a myth. They think it's just some wacko theory. But folks, if Jesus Christ rose from the dead, then this is not all there is. This life is not the end. And that's the miracle. That is the good news. That's the essence of the gospel. Because in that, we know that the reward is real. But there are people out there who don't know that. They don't understand. They don't know that the resurrection can be backed up with evidence, that it's a historical event. They don't know that. They've never heard the arguments for it. That's why Christian apologetics is so important. So these people who don't know that, you can understand why they might feel a compulsion toward artificial intelligence, toward transhumanism. The idea of not perfecting, but the idea of augmenting the human body in such a way that it could live forever. Well, now, eternal life is different than living forever in the sense they're talking about. They want to live forever in this creation here. Christian knows that eternal life, we're already in our eternal life, but we're going to have to see death. Well, some of us might not. That shocked me. Thanks for that, Clayton Jarvis. That thing shocked me when it came up there. Clayton Jarvis, $5 super chat says, thank you, brother. My old pastor didn't know about transhumanism. Most pastors don't even talk about these things. They will be caught by surprise. That's a good point. Well, I was so into what I was talking about, that super chat there, that thing shocked me, caught me off guard. Thank you for that, Clayton. I appreciate that. That's a good point. And it's well said. I am whoever you say I am, says Al Gore likes adrenochrome. Well, I don't know. Possibly. It's possibly. I don't know. You know what? Actually, the very first video that I ever did on this channel was about adrenochrome. Believe it or not. It was just an InfoWars article. That's all. So that's interesting. So thank you for that, Clayton Jarvis. I appreciate that. Yeah, you guys caught me off guard with that. Nanapi says the elites want to live forever, and they think they will through transhumanism. They do believe, well, that's why they spend so much money and put so much effort into transhumanism, because they really believe that they can somehow overcome death. Remember, folks, that is the first deception, the first lie in the Garden of Eden. When man was deceived to believing that he could be as God, and in that sense, live forever. If you would bow to Satan, if you would do what Satan said, if you would follow Satan's path. So remember, the very first lie, the very first deception keeps playing out over and over and over in the minds of men here today. Pam Pan says that adrenochrome is no joke. Elites love it. Could be. I don't know. They're into a lot of things that would probably just blow your mind. And the reason, transhumanism, the idea anyway, wherever adrenochrome, the idea of it came from anyway, that's essentially comes out of the idea of transhumanism. To try to augment your experience here, to try to live forever, to try to somehow overcome death. That is the first lie out of Satan's mouth. Off of his forked tongue. All right, so we are right now about 2 hours in. And that's probably enough for tonight. I would like to say this. Thank you for joining me, my friends. Anyone who feels compelled to do so can support this mission and ministry through the links in the description, paypal.me/Brad S. Ward, or you can join the Patreon through the link in the description. We've had quite a few people doing that lately, and I'm super grateful for that. Humbled and motivated by it. It requires your help and your support for this to continue, for this to grow and go wider to more and more people. This is all I do. 100% full-time ministry. That is what I'm here to do. And we will work together, my friends. God bless you all, my friends. Thank you for hanging out with me tonight. And we'll see you again next time right here. I see Impots getting in right before the buzzer with a $5 super chat. It says 1 John 4:4, which we will read. Little children, you are from God and have overcome them, for he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. You all are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world.